The door to my apartment vibrated with 3 urgent knocks at 10:30 at night. In 6 years of living in the same place, I knew every sound in this building. Mrs. Chen's footsteps climbing the stairs, the noise from the student's TV on the second floor, even the specific creak Gabriel's door made when he got home from work. But these knocks were different. They were desperate. Subscribe to the channel and leave a like to get access to more stories like this one. My name is Marcus Sullivan. I'm 32, and I work as a freelance illustrator here in Portland. I chose this life 6 years ago, after my last relationship imploded in such a devastating way that I decided it was easier to live alone. No drama, no disappointments, no one to hurt me. My routine was simple and predictable, exactly how I liked it. When I opened the door that October night, I found Gabriel Chen standing in the hallway, completely drenched. The rain had turned his dark hair into a wet mess, and his white shirt clung to his skinny body. He was shaking so much he could barely speak. "Sorry to bother you so late," he said, his voice trembling. "I'm your downstairs neighbor. The leak in my apartment. It destroyed my equipment. I have nowhere to go." Gabriel had moved into the apartment below mine just 2 weeks prior. I had seen him a few times in the hallway, always carrying boxes of books or strange electronic equipment. I knew from the landlord that he worked at the university, but other than that, he was a complete stranger. What you hear here is just the beginning. The full, unfiltered stories with all the details you can imagine are available now. See the link in the description right now. "Come in," I said, stepping away from the door. It wasn't like I had a choice. The man was literally dripping on the hallway carpet. Gabriel came in hesitantly, leaving small puddles of water on my apartment's hardwood floor. He looked around, taking in the details. My work desk by the window, the scattered drawings, the pile of graphic design books. "So you're the mysterious artist," he said, a shy smile appearing on his wet face. "I always hear classical music coming from up here. I wondered what my ghost neighbor was like." I grabbed a towel from the bathroom and handed it to him. "I'm not very social." "I noticed," Gabriel laughed, drying his hair. "In 2 weeks I think I've seen you 3 times in the hallway, and you always looked away." He wasn't wrong. I had a habit of avoiding eye contact with neighbors. It was simpler that way. Less complicated. Gabriel works as a university librarian, but not the kind most people imagine. He specializes in digitizing rare manuscripts. He travels to libraries and museums around the country, using sophisticated equipment to preserve historical documents in digital format. At 28, he had an energy that I had lost a long time ago. He was the kind of person who talked with his hands, who laughed out loud, who turned a simple conversation into a little adventure. That first night, he stayed on my couch until the storm passed. We talked about work. He was fascinated by my projects for startups, while I was genuinely surprised to be interested in his stories about medieval manuscripts and forgotten libraries. When the rain finally stopped, it was already almost 2 in the morning. Gabriel got up to leave, but hesitated at the door. "Thanks," he said. "Not just for the shelter. It's been a while since I've had a conversation like this." After that night, Gabriel started showing up more often. Always with an excuse. He needed sugar for his coffee, wanted to return a book I had lent him, or just knocked on the door to ask if I wanted to split the pizza he had ordered. My routine, which had been practically religious for years, began to unconsciously rearrange itself around these visits. I'd catch myself buying the most expensive coffee at the market, the one Gabriel had complimented. I started keeping my apartment tidier, just in case he showed up. Even my work playlist changed, including songs I knew he liked. The apartment I live in is on the 3rd floor of a brick building built in the 60s. The walls are thin enough for me to hear when Mrs. Chen turns on the TV on the 1st floor, or when the students on the 2nd floor have a party. My window looks out onto a small internal courtyard where 2 old trees grow, providing nice shade in the summer. It was a small but cozy space. It had everything I needed: an open kitchen, a bedroom, a tiny bathroom, and a living room that served as both an office and a sitting area. There was a brown leather armchair I bought at a thrift store, a small television I rarely turned on, and a 2-seater sofa covered by a blue blanket my mother had made years ago. It was this blanket that changed everything. On Gabriel's 3rd visit, he was telling a story about a manuscript he had digitized in a library in Boston, gesturing excitedly with his hands. The air conditioning was on, and out of nowhere, he stopped talking and said, "Wow, it's cold in here." Without thinking much, I pointed to the blanket. "You can use it if you want." Gabriel picked up the blue blanket and, instead of just covering himself, he moved closer on the couch and pulled the fabric around both of us. "This is better," he said, as if it were the most natural thing in the world. I should have moved away. I should have come up with some excuse to put distance between us. But I couldn't. There was something comforting in that closeness. Something I hadn't felt in years. The warmth of his body, the subtle scent of his cologne, mixed with the aroma of old books that always accompanied him. We kept talking, but there was a new dynamic there. A silent intimacy that hadn't existed before. Gabriel didn't move away when our knees touched. I didn't pull back when our shoulders brushed against each other. From that day on, the blue blanket became part of the ritual. Every time Gabriel came to visit, he would eventually pull the blanket over us. It was as if we had created our own nonverbal language, a form of intimacy that neither of us dared to name. The visits became more frequent. Gabriel would show up after work to tell me about his day. Sometimes he brought food. Always something different he had learned to make during his travels. Other times, he would just throw himself on the couch and complain about some difficult professor or the university bureaucracy. I started catching myself waiting for these visits. I'd look at the clock at 5 in the afternoon, knowing he usually arrived around 6. When he was traveling for work, the apartment felt strangely silent. It was during one of his trips that I realized how important his presence had become. Gabriel went to Seattle for a week to digitize a collection of historical letters, and I felt restless in a way I couldn't explain. I found myself looking at the blue blanket folded on the couch, remembering the feeling of having him nearby. Mrs. Chen didn't help. Every time I ran into her in the hallway, she would make comments about my handsome friend and ask when he was coming back. The students on the second floor also started greeting Gabriel by name when they saw him going up to my apartment. It was as if the entire building had noticed our growing friendship, and that made me uncomfortable. I had chosen a low-key life precisely to avoid this kind of attention. I didn't want people making assumptions about us. But the truth was, I was starting to make assumptions myself. There were moments while we were sharing the blanket on the couch when I'd find myself watching Gabriel's profile as he talked. The way his eyes lit up when he got excited about a project. How he had a habit of running his hand through his hair when he was thinking. The genuine laugh that escaped when I told some embarrassing story about my clients. I was developing feelings. Feelings I didn't know how to process, because 6 years ago I had decided it was safer to not feel anything for anyone. My last relationship had been with David, an advertising executive I met at a networking event. In the beginning, everything seemed perfect. He was confident, successful, the kind of man who knew exactly what he wanted. We dated for 2 years, and I even considered moving into his apartment, until I found out he'd been cheating on me for months with an intern from his office. The discovery wasn't dramatic. No catching him in the act or tearful confession. I just happened to see messages on his phone. Messages that made it clear I was just a convenience in his life. The part that hurt me the most wasn't even the betrayal. It was realizing that David had never really known me. In the 2 years we were together, he never showed any real interest in my work, never wanted to meet my family, never cared about my insecurities or dreams. I was just someone who was there, filling a space in his life. After that, I decided that relationships were too complicated. It was easier to live alone, focus on work, create a predictable routine where no one could disappoint me. But Gabriel was different. He asked questions about my work and actually listened to the answers. He remembered small details from our previous conversations. When I was stressed about a difficult project, he would show up with my favorite food without me even having to ask. There was a genuineness in him that I wasn't used to. Gabriel wasn't trying to impress me or convince me of anything. He was simply there, sharing his space and time with me in a way that felt natural and unforced. But this scared me, because it meant I was allowing someone into the carefully organized life I had built. What if Gabriel decided he didn't want to be there anymore? What if I was misinterpreting our friendship? These doubts became even more intense after Gabriel returned from Seattle. He showed up at my door on a Thursday night, exhausted from the trip, but with his eyes shining with excitement to tell me about the collection he had digitized. We sat on the couch as usual. He pulled the blue blanket around us and began describing love letters written during the Civil War. There was something different in his voice, an intensity I hadn't noticed before. "You know what impressed me the most about these letters?" he said, turning to look at me directly. "The courage these people had to put their feelings on paper, knowing it could be the last thing they ever wrote. The silence that followed was loaded with a tension neither of us knew how to break. I could feel the warmth of his body through the blanket. I could see the small lines around his eyes when he smiled. "Marcus," he said softly, and there was something about the way he said my name that made my heart race. But before he could continue, my phone rang. A client with a last-minute emergency. The moment fell apart. Gabriel pulled away slightly, and the rest of the night was spent in a more superficial conversation about work and weekend plans. After he left, I stayed up late thinking about that interrupted moment. Was there something Gabriel wanted to tell me? Or was I imagining things that weren't there? The following weeks brought a new tension to our interactions. Gabriel continued to come and visit, but there was a new cautiousness in the air, as if we were both walking on eggshells, careful not to cross some invisible line that could change everything between us. I'd catch myself analyzing every gesture, every word, looking for signs that he felt something beyond friendship. At the same time, I fought against my own feelings, trying to convince myself that it was better to keep things as they were. But the truth was, I couldn't imagine my life anymore without Gabriel showing up at my door at 6 in the evening, without his stories about old manuscripts, without the feeling of safety I felt when we shared the blue blanket on the couch. I was falling in love, and it completely terrified me. It was a Tuesday in November, when everything changed. Gabriel arrived at my door later than usual, almost 10 at night. When I opened it, I immediately noticed something was wrong. His shoulders were tense, his eyes red, as if he had been crying, and there was a contained frustration in the way he was standing in the hallway. "Can I come in?" he asked, his voice lower than usual. "Of course," I replied, stepping away from the door. "What happened?" Gabriel came in and slumped onto the couch harder than normal. He ran his hands over his face before looking at me. "I had a nasty fight with my family today," he said. "They called questioning my choices, my work, where I'm living. According to them, I'm wasting my potential by staying in this city, working at a small university." I sat down next to him, keeping a respectful distance. Gabriel rarely talked about his family, and when he did, there was always an underlying tension. "They want me to move to San Francisco, take a job at a tech company that pays 3 times as much," he continued, as if money is the only thing that matters. "And what do you want?" I asked. Gabriel looked at me for a long moment, as if he was carefully weighing his words. "I want to stay here. I want to keep doing the work I love. He stopped, hesitating. The apartment was warm from the heating, creating a cozy contrast with the biting cold outside. The only light came from the desk lamp, creating soft shadows that danced on our faces. I could smell the familiar scent that always accompanied him, a subtle mix of his cologne and the smell of paper and ink from his work. "Gabriel," I began, but he interrupted me. "I like being here," he said, his voice almost a whisper. "Not just in Portland. Here, in this apartment, with you." My heart leapt. The air between us became charged with an electricity I had been trying to ignore for weeks. Gabriel leaned slightly toward me, and I could feel the heat radiating from his body. "Marcus," he murmured, and there was a vulnerability in his voice that I had never heard before. Without saying anything, he reached for the blue blanket that was folded on the arm of the couch. But this time, when he pulled the fabric around us, it was different, more intimate. He moved closer on the couch until our thighs touched, until I could feel his slightly accelerated breathing. "Can I?" he asked, his hand finding my face. I should have hesitated. I should have thought about the consequences, the risks, all the reasons why it was a bad idea. But in that moment, with Gabriel so close I could count the small freckles around his eyes, all my defenses simply collapsed. "Yes," I whispered. The first kiss was hesitant, almost shy, like a careful question that gradually turned into a passionate answer. Gabriel's lips were soft and warm, moving against mine with a tenderness that made my chest tighten. My hands found his hair, my fingers intertwining in the soft strands. Gabriel sighed against my mouth, a low sound that reverberated through my entire body. He pulled me closer, eliminating any space that still existed between us. When we finally broke apart, we were both breathing heavily. Gabriel rested his forehead against mine, his eyes closed. "I've wanted to do that for weeks," he confessed. "Me too," I admitted, surprising myself with my own honesty. Gabriel smiled, that shy smile I had learned to love, and kissed me again. This time, there was no hesitation. His hands explored my face, my neck, moving down to find the hem of my shirt. "Are you sure?" he asked, pausing. In response, I stood up and held out my hand to him. Gabriel took it without hesitation, and I led him to my bedroom. The full moon outside filtered through the half-closed curtains, bathing the room in silver tones. Gabriel stopped by the bed, looking at me as if he were memorizing every detail of the moment. "You're beautiful," he said, and there was a reverence in his voice that made my throat tighten. Our clothes were removed slowly, each piece revealing more skin to be explored. Gabriel touched me like someone unfolding an ancient map, with care, with curiosity, as if every inch were a new territory to be discovered. When we were finally completely undressed, he pulled me onto the bed. The feeling of his skin against mine was electric, every point of contact sending waves of warmth through my body. Gabriel kissed my neck, moving down slowly. His hands traced invisible patterns on my skin, as if he were painting a masterpiece that only he could see. I arched under his touch, losing myself in the sensation of being completely known, completely desired. Gabriel. I murmured his name like a prayer. He responded by moving up to kiss me again, our bodies aligning perfectly. When we finally came together, it was like two puzzle pieces finding their place. Natural, inevitable, right in a way I had never experienced before. We moved together in an ancient rhythm, each movement a silent conversation between our bodies. Gabriel whispered my name against my skin. His hands intertwined with mine. I could feel every muscle in his body working, every accelerated breath, every small sound of pleasure that escaped his lips. The world outside ceased to exist. There was only us, only that moment, only the overwhelming feeling of being completely connected with another human being. Every touch was a revelation. Every kiss rewrote years of self-imposed loneliness. When the climax finally came, it was like waves breaking against the shore. Powerful, inevitable, transformative. Gabriel collapsed against me, our bodies still intertwined, breaths mingling as we tried to catch our breath. We stayed like that for long minutes, just existing in the intimate space we had created. Gabriel traced lazy circles on my chest, while I ran my fingers through his already messy hair. "This changes everything," he said eventually, his voice raspy. "I know," I replied, and for the first time in years, I wasn't scared of the idea of change. Gabriel pulled away slightly to look at me. "I don't want it to be just one night." My heart raced again, but this time for completely different reasons. "Me neither." He smiled, that radiant smile I had learned to recognize, and kissed me softly. "Then it won't be." The next morning, I woke up with Gabriel still in my arms. The sunlight came in gently through the curtains, illuminating his relaxed face in sleep. I lay there for several minutes just watching him, trying to process the magnitude of what had happened. For 6 years, I had built a life based on solitude, on predictability, on the absence of emotional complications. In a single night, Gabriel had torn down all those walls I thought were impenetrable. And the most surprising thing of all, I wasn't sorry. When Gabriel finally woke up, he found me looking at him. "Good morning," he said, his voice still raspy from sleep. "Good morning," I replied, unable to contain the smile that spread across my face. We made breakfast together in a silent dance through the small kitchen. Gabriel was wearing one of my t-shirts, which was a little too big for him. There was a domestic intimacy in all of it that was both new and surprisingly natural. "About last night," Gabriel began as we drank coffee. "It was perfect," I interrupted him. He smiled. "It really was. But I want you to know it wasn't just about frustration with my family or about being emotionally vulnerable. I've been feeling this for weeks." "Me too," I admitted. "Ever since that first time you pulled the blanket around us." Gabriel laughed. "I was freezing that day, but later I started doing it just to have an excuse to be close to you." We spent the morning talking about us, about what this meant, about where we wanted our relationship to go. As scary as it was to admit, I felt as if a part of me that had been dormant for years had finally awakened. Gabriel eventually had to leave. He had an important presentation at the university. But before he left, he pulled me in for a last kiss. "Can I come back tonight?" he asked. "You don't even have to ask," I replied. After he left, I sat on the couch where everything had started. The blue blanket was lying there, still carrying the subtle scent of Gabriel. I picked it up, feeling the familiar texture of the fabric my mother had woven years ago. Who knew that a simple blanket would become the symbol of such a profound transformation in my life? For the first time in 6 years, I wasn't just existing. I was living. And that scared and excited me in equal measure. The apartment, which for so long had been my lonely refuge, now carried Gabriel's presence in every corner. His coffee mug by the sink, the book he had left on the side table, the pillow that still held the shape of his head. I had spent years building walls to protect myself from the possibility of being hurt again. But Gabriel had found a way to get through those defenses without violently tearing them down. He had simply shown me that on the other side of the walls, there was something much better than the safety of solitude. There was the possibility of being truly known, truly loved, truly alive. And for the first time in a long time, I was willing to take that risk. The next 3 days passed in a golden haze of discoveries. Gabriel came back that night as promised, and the next, and the one after that. We developed a natural intimacy that went far beyond the physical. He knew how I liked my coffee in the morning. I knew he always checked his emails before bed. Small domestic rituals that seemed to have existed for years. But on Thursday, something changed. Gabriel arrived later than usual, and when I opened the door, I noticed a tension in his face that hadn't been there in the previous days. He came in, but didn't go straight to the couch as had become customary. Instead, he stood by the window, looking out at the inner courtyard. "We need to talk," he said, without turning around. My stomach dropped. Those 4 words were universally dreaded, regardless of the context. "About what?" Gabriel finally turned to face me. "About what we're doing. About where this is going." I sat on the couch, waiting. The blue blanket was folded on the arm, but this time neither of us made a move to get it. "I called my family today," Gabriel continued. "I told them about you. This caught me by surprise." "Told them what exactly?" "That I'm getting involved with someone, that it's serious." He paused. They weren't exactly happy. "Because it's a man?" I asked, although I suspected the issue was more complex. "No, they've known about my orientation for years. It's more about you being a complication in the plans they have for my life." Gabriel ran his hand through his hair, a gesture I had learned to recognize when he was stressed. "They think I'm settling down too young, that I should be focusing on my career, maybe taking that offer in San Francisco." "And what do you think?" I asked, though I wasn't sure I wanted to hear the answer. Gabriel moved closer and sat on the couch, but kept a greater distance than usual. "I think they're scared. Scared that I'm making decisions based on emotion instead of logic." "And are you?" He looked me straight in the eyes. "Maybe. And that scares me too." The silence that followed was heavy. I could feel all my old insecurities coming back to the surface. The voices in my head whispering that I should have known this was too good to last. "Marcus," Gabriel said softly, "I need to be honest with you. These last few days have been incredible. More than incredible. But everything happened too fast." My chest tightened. "You're looking to take a step back." "I don't know," he admitted. "Maybe I just need some time to process. To be sure that I'm not making rushed decisions." I nodded, trying to keep my expression neutral. But inside, I felt like I was falling apart. It was David again, in a different way. It was me being abandoned the moment things got too real. "Of course," I managed to say. "I understand perfectly." Gabriel must have noticed something in my tone, because he leaned toward me. "Hey, it's not about you. You're amazing, Marcus. It's about me not knowing how to handle such intense feelings." "You don't have to explain," I said, standing up. "You're right. It all happened too fast." Gabriel stood up too, hesitantly. "We can still be friends, right? Can I still come over once in a while?" "Of course," I lied. After he left, I sat on the couch for hours. The blue blanket was there, reminding me of everything that had happened, of how, for a few perfect days, I had believed that maybe I could have something real with someone. In the following week, Gabriel kept his word and still showed up occasionally. But it was different. Cordial, friendly, but with an invisible barrier that hadn't existed before. He no longer pulled the blanket around us. He sat in the armchair instead of the couch. Our conversations were superficial, careful. I pretended everything was okay, but the truth was, every visit was torture. Seeing Gabriel there, so physically close but emotionally distant, constantly reminded me of what we had lost. After 2 weeks of this uncomfortable dance, I decided I needed real space. I started making excuses when he showed up. I had an urgent project. I was expecting an important call, anything to shorten the visits. Gabriel wasn't stupid. He knew what I was doing. But he didn't say anything, maybe feeling that he also needed that distance. It was during the 3rd week that everything changed again. It was a Friday night, and I was on the couch working on my laptop when I heard the familiar knocks on the door. My heart automatically sped up, a conditioned response I still hadn't managed to suppress. I opened the door expecting to find Gabriel with his carefully neutral expression. Instead, he was there with the blue blanket in his hands, his eyes red and his jaw tense. "Can I come in?" he asked. I hesitated for a moment before stepping away from the door. Gabriel came in and went straight to the couch, but didn't sit down. He just stood there, holding the blanket as if it were an offering. "You forgot this at my place," he said, although we both knew that was a lie. The blanket had been right there on my couch during all his recent visits. "Gabriel," I started. "No," he interrupted me. "Let me talk first." I nodded, crossing my arms. "I made a mistake," he said, his voice trembling. "A huge mistake. I let my family and my own fears convince me that what we had was just a passing infatuation. My heart started to beat faster, but I forced myself to keep a neutral expression. "These 3 weeks have been hell," Gabriel continued. "I tried to pretend everything was okay, that it was better this way, but I can't do it anymore. I can't keep pretending we're just neighbors when you're so much more than that to me." He took a step toward me. "I love you, Marcus. I know it's scary. I know it's complicated. I know my family will lose their minds. But I love you." The words hung in the air between us. I wanted to believe. I wanted to throw myself into his arms and forget all the weeks of pain we had just gone through. But the fear was stronger. "Gabriel," I said carefully, "you said you needed time, that you were confused." "I was," he admitted. "But 3 weeks without you showed me exactly what I want. I want you. I want this." He gestured between the two of us. "I want to share breakfast with you. I want to hear about your frustrating projects. I want to sleep with you in my arms." Tears started to form in my eyes. "What if you change your mind again?" Gabriel dropped the blanket on the couch and came closer. "I won't change. I promise I won't." "How can you be so sure?" "Because," he said, taking my hands in his, "because these were the worst 21 days of my life. Because I wake up in the morning thinking about you and go to sleep at night wishing you were there. Because when my mom called me yesterday asking if I had gotten over this phase, I told her it wasn't a phase. That you're the person I want to build a life with." My resistance started to crumble. "Gabriel, I know I hurt you," he said, his voice breaking slightly. "I know you have every reason not to trust me, but please give me a chance to prove I'm serious." I looked at him, really looked at him. I saw the sincerity in his eyes, the desperation, the love he was laying completely bare. I saw the man who had become part of my routine, part of my days, part of me. "I love you too," I whispered finally. Gabriel's face lit up as if I had just given him the greatest gift in the world. He moved closer, his hands finding my face. "So can we try again? Can we do this right this time?" In response, I kissed him. It was different from the kisses we had shared before. More desperate, more necessary, loaded with weeks of longing and regret. When we pulled apart, Gabriel picked up the blue blanket and unfolded it around us, exactly as he had done that first night when he said he was cold. But this time, we both knew it wasn't about the temperature. It was about connection, about intimacy, about creating a space that was just ours. "This time it's for real," he said against my lips. "This time it's for real," I agreed. We spent the rest of the night on the couch, just talking. Gabriel told me about the arguments he had with his family, about how he had finally set boundaries and made it clear that his life decisions were his own. I shared how the last few weeks had made me realize I was ready to risk my heart again. "You know what's funny?" Gabriel said while tracing lazy patterns on my arm. "My family always said I was too impulsive, that I made decisions based on emotion. But with you, for the first time in my life, following my heart feels like the most logical decision in the world." I smiled, pulling him closer. "Maybe that's because some things are right, even when they don't make sense on paper." "Like us," he agreed. When Gabriel finally left that night, it was with the promise to return the next day, not for a cautious visit or a superficial conversation, but as my boyfriend, as someone who was consciously choosing to be a part of my life. After he left, I sat on the couch with the blue blanket still around me. The fabric carried the scent of Gabriel, the memory of his arms, the promise of all the future nights we would spend here together. 6 years ago, I had decided it was safer to live alone. For years, that decision had protected me from disappointment and hurt, but it had also protected me from the possibility of being truly happy. Gabriel had shown me that there was a difference between being safe and being alive, and for the first time in a long time, I was choosing to live. My apartment was no longer just a lonely refuge. It was a home, a place where love had found a way to flourish, where two men had learned that sometimes the best things in life arrive when you least expect them. The blue blanket would remain there on the couch, a silent witness to our journey. From strange neighbors to friends, from friends to lovers, from lovers to something deeper and more lasting. What you hear here is just the beginning. The full, unfiltered stories with all the details you can imagine are available now. See the link in the description right now. If this story touched your heart as it touched mine while living it, leave a like to support more narratives about authentic connections. Subscribe to the channel and hit the bell to not miss the next stories that explore the beauty of unexpected encounters that transform our lives. In the comments, tell me, do you believe that the best connections happen when we least expect them? Until the next story, and remember, sometimes it's worth risking your heart for someone who makes you feel at home.